Hey guys, it's Mr. Lowry back. We're working on our factoring review here. This is just the next problem set that I wanted to go over with you. Again, if you are pretty comfortable with factoring, then I wouldn't necessarily watch this. I would probably just jump to the assignment. Make sure you do your attendance quiz so that I can mark you present for today, and also give you points for that. So we're talking about factoring today, but these two problems, 7 and 8, they're actually not factoring problems. They're just designed to help us get set up for factoring. So one of the things that we got to keep in mind is factoring is the opposite of foiling. Up here, we talked about how factoring is the opposite of distribution. And that's still true because foiling is just a method of distribution. It's actually a double distribution. So factoring is the opposite of distribution. Factoring is the opposite of foiling. That's the same kind of idea. So in order to get some clues or some insight into how to factor, we have to foil a lot to be able to figure out what's going on here. So in FOIL stands for first, outside, inside, last. So that's just the order that we multiply these terms in. So notice I have 2 terms here and 2 terms here, and I got to use all the combinations there, multiplying. So when I talk about first, right, I'm talking about multiplying the first term from this binomial and the first term from this binomial. So that's what the F stands for, first. All right, so x times x is x squared. Okay, so that's what I get when I multiply my first terms. Okay, the O stands for outside. So I'm looking for the 2 outside terms, right? So notice that these 2 terms are kind of on the outsides of the whole expression, on the edges here. So x times -7, right? That's going to give me a -7x. So first and then inside. Notice all we really did was distribute an x. That's pretty much it. Okay. All we need to do now is just distribute the 5 through. Right, so we distribute the x through, and then we distribute the 5 through. No worries. Okay, so I stands for inside, right? So that's these 2 guys, the 2 inside terms when they're closest to each other. So 5 times x is 5x. Okay, and then L stands for last. So last is the 2 last pieces of each binomial. 5 is the last piece of this binomial, and -7 is the last piece of this binomial. So 5 times -7 is going to be -35. Okay. So notice I have 4 terms because there's 4 different combinations of these 4 terms. There's x and x and -7, x and 5 or 5 and x, and then 5 and -7. So that's FOIL. The last thing we have to do is if we have any like terms, which we do, we need to combine them. So a -7 and a +5 is going to give me a -2x. Okay. So that should be a skill that you already have, but just in case you don't, or just in case you need extra help, there you go. That's how you FOIL. Okay. Let's take a look over here and do the same thing here. So we're going to basically distribute. Now back over here, sorry, let's go back over here real quick. After we distributed the x through, right, x times -7, we basically distributed the 5 through. 5 times x and then 5 times -7. So whether you think about this as FOIL, first, outside, inside, last, or whether you think of it as double distribution, it's the same process, whatever works for you. So over here, we're going to do either a double distribution or a FOIL. So first terms, right? So x times x, that's the first thing we're going to do. We get x squared. Okay, then we have x times -3, which is -3x. Then we're going to have -12 times x, which is -12x. And then we have -12 times -3, so be careful. A negative times a negative is a positive. So that's +36. Okay, so again, the first, x squared, x times x. Outside, -3 times x is -3x. Inside, -12x, or -12 times x, goes here. And then last, -12 times -3. First, outside, inside, last. That's what FOIL stands for. Or double distribution, right? Distribute the x through these 2 terms. X times x is x squared. X times -3 is -3x. And then distribute the -12. -12 times x is -12x. -12 times -3 is +36. And then combine like terms. Okay, now you might be thinking to yourself, yeah, I know foiling, I can do FOIL. Why is he doing FOIL? This is old stuff. It's totally true. But the thing that we have to know is we have to recognize some patterns to be able to factor. So if you're having a hard time factoring, we got to take a step back and we got to think about FOIL, because they're opposites of each other. They're inverses, basically. Okay. So let's take a look at these, at what we got here. When we multiply a binomial that looks like this with an x and an x, we get a trinomial, right? 3 terms, because we started out with 4 terms and then we combined the middle one. This number right here is super important. It comes from combining the -7 and the 5, right? In other words, the -7 and the 5 combine to give me the coefficient of my middle term, right? They also multiply to give me my last term. 5 times -7 is -35. Okay, same thing is true here. I combine a -12 and a -3. I put them together, like basically add them, and I get this -15. Okay, that's how I get that middle number, as basically by combining these two guys. That's the coefficient of x. By multiplying them, I get this 36 here. -12 times 3 is -36. Those are really, really important patterns to know in order to be able to factor. If you don't see that pattern, then factoring is going to be really hard. So again, when you see something that looks like this, a trinomial, you know it had to come from something that looks like this, just from experience, just from foiling time and time again, right? This is just going backwards. We think to ourselves, well, what 2 numbers combine to give me a -15 and add to give me a 36? Those are the 2 numbers that I need to put inside parentheses with an x in front of them. Okay, that's what we're going to use for the next couple problems. So let's move on to the next few here. Okay, so factor the trinomial expression and then check your answer by foiling. So this is our check. Right, now we're going to unfoil, and then to make sure we did it right, we're just going to foil back again to make sure we did it right. Okay, so here's the deal. We're looking at this trinomial, right? Trinomial means 3 terms. And it looks really similar to what we had before. We have a variable squared, and then a number times a variable, and then just a number, right? So we have a k squared, then a k, and then just a number. That's kind of similar to what we had over here. An x squared, and then an x, and then a number. An x squared, and then an x, and then a number. So very, very similar. Just from experience, again, we know we can get a trinomial like this if we factor it to be something like this, 2 binomials, right? Now the only way we can get a k squared up here is if we have a k times a k. So I'm just filling in what I know. K times k will give me k squared, okay? Now the other thing we know is that whatever these 2 numbers are here, whatever goes here, they need to multiply to give me 12, and they need to combine to give me 8, okay? So 2 numbers that multiply to 12 and combine to give you 8. You can kind of run through those possibilities or think through them yourself. Let me give you a kind of a way to organize that. You don't have to do this way, but sometimes what you'll see people do is you'll put an x here. And on the top, they'll put a 12, and on the bottom, they'll put an 8. And what they're going to do is they're going to try 2 numbers here that will multiply to give me this and then add to give me this. So this is just, again, just a way of organizing it. So let's think of some multiples of 12. Okay, how about 1 and 12? Okay, so 1 times 12 is 12. Perfect. 1 plus 12 is 8. Okay, that's not going to work because 1 plus 12 is not 8. Okay, let's try 3 and 4. Okay, 3 times 4 is 12. Okay, awesome, got it. But 3 plus 4 is 8, so that doesn't work. Remember, these 2 numbers that go in here, they're going to have to add to give me that one, just like we saw on the previous page. Okay, how about 2 and 8? Sorry, not 2 and 8, 2 and 6. Okay, 2 times 6 is 12. Awesome. 2 plus 6 is 8. Yeah. Okay, cool. So those are the 2 numbers. 2 and 6 are the 2 numbers that need to go back here. And it doesn't really matter the order. Plus 2 plus 8, right? Okay, let's just double check, just to make sure, right? And this is an important step to kind of bring everything together. So k times k is k squared. K times 8 is 8. Oh, sorry, this needs to be a 6, not an 8. Sorry about that. This is a 2 and a 6, right? 2 and a 6, okay. Sorry. K times 6 is 6k. Okay. 2 times k is 2k. And then 2 times 6 is 12. Right, so there's my FOIL, right? First, outside, inside, last, or double distribution, whatever you want to do. Okay. Combine these two like terms, I'm going to get k squared plus 8k plus 12. Okay, well that's what I started with. So I know that this is the right answer, right? Now let's not get confused. This is not the answer we're looking for. This is what we started with. This is the answer that we wanted. We wanted to factor it, or undistribute, or unfoil. Okay? The only reason why we multiplied them is to just check, to make sure we did it the right way. And again, that kind of just reinforces the idea that whatever this number is, it comes from the sum of these two numbers. Whatever this number is, it comes from the product, or multiplying these two numbers. Okay? Now that's true whenever there's just a 1 here. We're going to talk about some factoring some things where this is not like a 1k squared. There's actually another number up front. But for now, this is just kind of in the basics here. All right. Let's do number 10 together, and then you guys can try 11 and 12 on your own, and we can just practice it that way. Okay? So again, I'm looking at a trinomial. Okay? I want to FOIL it or undistribute it. Now, I know that this comes from something that looks like this, right? 2 binomials multiplied. How do we know that? Well, pretty much just from experience, right? When you FOIL enough things, FOIL enough problems, you kind of start to see some patterns, right? This is where we did some foiling, right? We FOILed 2 binomials, and we got these trinomials. So the idea is, if we can factor this trinomial, then it's going to come from 2 binomials. And again, this is going to have to be x and x, because that's the only way we can get x squared right here. X times x is x squared. Okay? Now the numbers that go here, they have to combine to give me a negative 10, and they have to multiply to give me a negative 10, and combine to give me a positive 3. Okay? So you can try a few things in there. You can kind of guess and check if you want to, but let's do this little x thing again. This is just to keep track of our guesses or whatever. So we got a negative 10. We have to multiply to get a negative 10, and then we're going to combine to do a 3. Okay, so we got to think of some factors of 10. Well, 10 and 1 work, right? Those will give me a 10, but we need it to multiply to a negative 10. So let's try this. Negative 1 and 10. Those two numbers will multiply to give me a negative 10. Okay, what if I combine them though? Negative 1 combined with 10, that's going to give me a 9, a positive 9, and I want a 3, so that's not going to work. Okay, what if we try a positive 1 and a negative 10? Well, those will still multiply to negative 10, so that works there. But 1 combined with negative 10, or 1 plus negative 10, is going to give me a negative 9. And again, I want a 3. So that's not going to work there either. Okay, what about 2 and 5? Okay, let's try negative 2 and positive 5. Okay, if I multiply negative 2 and positive 5, I'm going to get a negative 10, which is great. If I combine them, do I get a 3? Yep. Negative 2 plus 5 is positive 3. Perfect. Okay, so these are the two numbers that we're looking for, negative 2 and 5. So I want a negative 2 here and a 5 here. No worries. Okay, so that should be our answer. But we're going to check here. So let's just go back through, double check, and see what we got. So let's FOIL. So x times x is x squared. Okay, perfect. X times 5 is 5x. So we did first, outside. Now inside, to inside. Negative 2 times x is negative 2x. And then last, negative 2 times 5. Negative 10. Just foiling here. So when we combine our like terms, which are right here, I'm going to get a plus 3x and then a minus 10, which is exactly what we started with. So we know, okay, great. This is what we're after. This is actually our answer. We thought it was, but now we've just confirmed that it was by foiling. Okay? All right. If you went through those two things with me, great. Let's try these ones on your own and see if you can get them. Okay, so go ahead and pause the video now and see if you can go through and factor these yourselves. Okay, let's take a look together. So we got an n squared minus 3n minus 54. Again, we know how this is going to factor just from experience with foiling. It's going to factor to 2 terms in parentheses times 2 terms in parentheses. And the first ones have to be n, right? N and n is the only way you're going to get n squared. Okay, So n times n is n squared. Now, the numbers that go back here, what we know about them is they have to multiply to give me a negative 54, but they have to combine to give me a negative 3. So I'm going to put my negative 54 up here, and I'm going to put my negative 3 down here. So we got to think of factors, things that multiply to 54. If you're not sure, you can get out a calculator and kind of try a few different things. But I think what's going to work for us here is a 6 times a 9. So let's try a negative 6 and a positive 9. Okay, so negative 6 times positive 9 is a negative 54. That's what we want. Negative 6 plus positive 9 is going to be a positive 3. So that's not what we want there. That's not going to give me the right thing. So let's try to switch the signs. Okay. So what we got is 6 and negative 9. We combine, or multiply to give me a negative 54. Okay, that still works. 6 combined with a negative 9 gives me the negative 3 that I want. Okay, awesome. So it looks like my two numbers that go in here are negative 9 and negative 3. Okay, let's just double check. Now this should be our answer, but let's double check. N times n is n squared, so now we're going to FOIL first. Then outside, n times negative 3. Then inside, negative 9 times n. And then last, negative 9 times... Oh, sorry, I did it again. This needs to be a 6. Okay, let's go back and fix this. That's why we write in pencil. N times n is n squared. Again, we're looking for these two numbers here. And the order doesn't matter. N times n is n squared. N times 6 is 6n. Negative 9 times n is negative 9n. Negative 9 times 6 is negative 54. Okay, so n squared minus 3n minus 54. Okay, well that's what we started with, right? Which is great. That means that these two things are equivalent. That means this is the factored form. Okay, got it. All right, last one for this section. All right, so we're going to start out again with these guys right here. We need to have an x and an x because x times x is going to give me x squared. Now these two numbers that go back here, they have to combine to give me an 80, and multiply to give me an 80, and combine to give me a negative 18. All right, well, it looks like it's going to be an 8 and a 10. So let's put our 80 up here. Let's put our negative 18 down here. We need to multiply to a negative 80, so we can have an 8 and a negative 10. Okay. 8 times negative 10, though, is negative 80. That's not what I want. I want a positive 80, right? Well, they can both be positive, so let's try that. 8 and 10. So 8 times 10 is 80. Awesome. 8 plus 10, though, is positive 18, and we want a negative 18. So the only way we're going to get a positive 80 and a negative 18 is if these are both negative. So negative 8 times negative 10, negative times negative, gives me a positive 80. That's what we want. But if I combine a negative 8 with a negative 10, I'm going to get the negative 18. So those are the two numbers I'm looking for. Okay, so negative 8 and negative 10. All right, that should be our answer. Let's just double check. X times x is x squared. Okay, x times negative 10 is negative 10x. Okay, negative 8 times x is negative 8. And negative 8 times 10, negative 10, is positive 80. Okay, so x squared, I combine these two guys to get a negative 18x. And then there's my plus 80. So this is what I started with, which means that this was right. What I had was exactly right. Okay. All right, so those are the basics of factoring trinomials. So try those out. If you need to go back and do some more for practice, that's great. This is something you should definitely have locked in by now. So if you don't, this video is for you. If you do have those already, great. You probably didn't need this video, and it was probably a little too slow for you, honestly. So make sure you have this skill locked in because you're definitely going to need it in the future. And come back if you need help on the next ones. I'm going to do the next problem set here in just a minute.